Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be going over number 8 on Leetcode, which is string to integer or atoi. The problem is actually quite simple. You just want to take in an input of a string and convert it into a valid integer. There are 4 main rules you have to follow. First is that if there's any white space before the number, just cut it off. Second, if there's any sign before the number, like plus or minus, then you have to take that into consideration while making your number. Third is that if there are any non-valid characters after the integer part, then those characters are not even considered into the integer. Fourth is that if there's any problem with generating the integer, or if there's any characters before the integer, then it counts as invalid integer and just a 0 is returned. Also, the integer will always be in between the integer's min and max value, which range from negative 2 to the power of 31 and positive 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. Here are a few examples. In the first example, just a regular integer is passed and then you just return the integer value 42. Second, if there's white space in front of the integer, then you take that off and you take into consideration the minus sign before the 42. So you return negative 42. Third, there's some invalid characters afterwards, so those are just cut off and we don't care about those. But if the characters are before the number, then it's an invalid integer and just a 0 is returned. And finally, this integer is less than the minimum value for an integer, so the integer's min value is returned. Now that we know what the problem is, let's start coding it. First of all, we need some basic variables. First, we have the number that we actually are going to return. And then we converted the string into a character array and stored it in this array called cars using the Java's inbuilt toChar array method, so that we don't have to work with the strings method like index of or char at. We can just call it from the array. Next, if the length of the string is 0, that means it's just an empty string, then we just return 0. And then this I represents a counter, which is just the index in the array that we are looping through. And then the sign variable is just the sign of the integer. And lastly, we have a current character that will be inside the loop, and that is just the first character in the array. First, we want to implement the first rule, which is just skip all of the preceding white spaces in the string. So to do that, we just have a short while loop. While the current character is a white space, then just increment. And then once I gets to the end of the array, then just return 0, because that means all of the characters inside the string are white spaces. After this loop completes, the I will be at the first non-white space character. So now we need to implement the second rule, which is to check if the number has a sign or not. We just have to check if it's a minus, then set the sign to a -1 and then increment I. Or if it's a plus, then set the sign to 1 and increment I. So that I goes to the next character, which will probably be the first integer in the string. Next, we want to go through all the integers in the string and make the number and then return it. So we have this loop. There's no initial condition because we already have the I declared up top. The variable I will go from wherever it was up until the last index in the array. And each time we will set the current character to the character at the ith index in the array. Then we will check if the current character is not an integer. That means it's outside of the ASCII values of 0 and 9. Then just break out of this loop and return whatever we already have in the number. Lastly, if the character is an integer, then we can finally append it to the existing number by saying num times equals 10 and then num plus equals current minus 0. This gets the value because previously current was a character and we want to get the integer value out of that. So we need the difference between that character and 0. For example, if the current was 5, then the ASCII value of 5 minus ASCII value of 0 will return the integer 5. So this ensures that if the number was 34 before and the current character is 2, then num will go from 34 to 342. We do this for all of the numbers inside the string, and by doing this each time, we can make the whole integer. Above, we set the number to a long because we don't want it throwing an exception if the integer is out of bounds of the integer's min or max value, which is actually possible as shown in example 5. So all we want to do is that if the sign times the number is less than the min value or is greater than the max value, then we want to return whichever value is correct so that we can check if the number is outside of the valid bound. After going through this big loop, we are sure that the number is made and we have the correct number inside the num variable. So now all we need to do is append the sign to the number by doing num times equals sign, because sign was either -1 or +1 depending on the character in front of the number, and then we just return the integer value of num. And that is all we need to do for this problem. If we submit it, as you can see, our program is faster than 100% of all online Java submissions. If you like this tutorial, please leave a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on what you liked or disliked about the video. Also, if you need any help with Java, I do a private Java tutoring service. You can find out more information at chatterjeetutoring.com. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.